Where in Melbourne is the best place to buy your first home on a small budget with a deposit as little as $21,000? This episode, we're unpacking 3 locations, some I've never even thought about, that could be the key to get you into your first home this year.
Nicola, when I ran some figures, I was blown away on how little of a deposit people need to be able to get into a property in Melbourne. So we're going to go through a few examples in some suburbs today where you can buy a property with a deposit as low as $21,000. Let's now start off with a suburb called Travancore. So Travancore is relatively close to CBD.
Only 4 Ks, is that correct?
Only 4 Ks away from the CBD. This property is an apartment, so it's a 2-bedroom apartment. Presents very well, and we'll go through what this property is. So that's the apartment block there. Kitchen, living area, bathroom, very tidy, views.
Looks nice and neat.
Nice surrounding areas. Like we said, 4Ks from the CBD. Decent floor plan. So you got your kitchen, living area, and 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. So and a balcony as well. So this is a property a first home buyer can buy with a deposit as low as $21,000. So with the government guarantee scheme, $350,000 purchase for this property.
So why is that so cheap?
Yeah, it's a good question, Nicola. So from my understanding, in Victoria at the moment, there is an oversupply of apartments, which means apartment prices have dropped. So it's actually good timing for a first home buyer to get into the market and buy an apartment at the moment, because I know that to build this apartment block, you wouldn't be able to build it for $350,000 an apartment. So the cost of replacing this property is higher than what you're actually buying it for. So I think it's a good time to be able to buy. If you want to get into the market, buy an apartment in Victoria at $350,000, 2-bedroom apartment, close to CBD. I think it's worth considering.
Would there be extra strata fees and things with the price so low?
Not necessarily because of the price so low, but because it's an apartment building, you always got to look into whether or not there are strata fees. So you'll definitely be looking into that on any apartment building that you're buying.
And you said that we only needed a $21,000 deposit for this particular apartment or first home. What would have to be your income?
So let's just run through this scenario very quickly. So you have $350,000 purchase. I've based this on a 95% loan because a first home buyer can borrow 95% with no mortgage insurance with the government guarantee scheme. So we've got a 95% loan, which is a loan of $332,500. Of about $2,000 for legal fees to be able to buy that property, which means they can get into this property with a deposit of $21,000. Now, let's work this backwards and work out what a first home buyer would have to earn to be able to borrow that money for this property. So a loan of $332,000. Their income would need to be $61,000 a year. That's assuming no other liabilities, no other HECS debts. If they were working full-time or earning $61,000, they could afford to buy this property with a $21,000 deposit.
So that's definitely possible. That's just a normal full-time job.
Correct.
Whether it be retail, hospitality.
Correct. So first of all, deposit of $21,000 is achievable for most people to be able to save. And then an income of $61,000 is, again, something that someone on any full-time job should be able to earn.
But that's also saying no other liabilities, car loan, HECS debt.
Correct, yeah. So if you do have other liabilities, that's where you've got to run your servicing calculators, work out what you can borrow, speak to your finance broker and know what you can do.
So I'm not sure everyone wants to live in an apartment. An apartment lifestyle isn't for some people. And I don't think I'm the type of person to want to live in an apartment. So can we move on to some houses?
Sure. So the next suburb that I've looked into is Laverton in Victoria. And I've been tracking this house for a few weeks now. And I noticed that it just recently sold for $539,000. So this property was listed for $440 to $480, but just noticed that it's been sold for $539. So what agents sometimes do is they try to bait the price. So they put the price lower than what they're actually going to get for it. They get people interested, and then they obviously try to get the best price possible for the vendor. And this is a good example of that, where the highest asking price was $480, but they actually got $540 for it. So an extra $60,000 more than what their asking price was. But in saying that, it's still very affordable at $540, given the location of where the property is, the size of the block being 634 square metres. Yeah, with Laverton as a suburb.
I think it was 17 kilometres away from the CBD.
So it's about 17 k's away from the CBD. Median price in Laverton was around $600,000. So this is a very affordable area where first home buyers could be looking to find their first home. So the other key factor to look into is the days on market for a suburb. So Laverton has got an average days of market of 52 days, as opposed to a suburb like Frankston that is below 30.
So that's more competition in Frankston.
Correct. There's a lot more competition in Frankston to be able to buy a property. So you're looking at a market where there's not as much competition, but still quite affordable and a good area to potentially look into buying your first home. Now let's just go through this property very quickly. It's probably not the perfect property, but definitely livable and definitely a property that a bank would fund against. So it's got bathrooms, nice pink bath there, average size bedrooms, but what it does have is a decent backyard.
But it's on an odd block shape. Does that matter?
It is a bit odd there, but what opportunities it does present is that probably less competition from developers be able to buy this block to develop. So that's probably why the price is where it is, because it is something that really attract the developer market and maybe just the first home buyer market. Because if this was a 650 square metre block on a standard rectangular sized block, it would be a lot more demand for it. So
and more appealing to developers.
So it might not be the best area. So make sure you drive the streets, feel the area, look at the neighbouring properties. I can see here, this property here's got a fair bit of stuff in the front yard, which you might want to just see what that is. So let's look at this now. I've just run the scenario on a $500,000 purchase for Laverton.
So how much would my deposit have to be in my income as well?
Again, 95% lend, loan of $475,000, deposit required $29,000.
So that's not that much more.
Not much more for
a house.
For a house, correct.
But it's also further away from the CBD
It
in
is.
worse condition.
But on bigger land.
Yeah.
So pros and cons. Now, for that loan amount of around $475,000, your income as a single person will need to be $90,000 to buy that property and buy that by yourself. As a couple, obviously, that's different. That's where you just got to assess your situation and your borrowing capacity there.
So your income will have to be a bit higher
It would be. So from $61,000 for
to 90.
a $350,000 apartment to $90,000 for a $500,000 house. This might not be the best area right now, but suburbs change. New families move in, old houses get developed, and suburbs change. Like St Kilda in Victoria used to be a very poor, low-class area, which is now the demographics there have changed significantly and the property values have increased a lot. So although now might not be the best suburb, in 10 years' time, that might change. So they're the things you need to be aware of when you're buying property and look for opportunities for capital growth.
So let's talk about the last area in Melbourne, Dad. It's called Jacana.
So Jacana is a suburb near Broadmeadows. Jacana is 15 km from the CBD. Average price, medium house price around $600,000. Average days of market, I think it was about 34 days. So demand in that area is relatively strong. You know how I was talking about Laverton, that was 52 days in market. This is 34. So you're going to have more competition in Jacana trying to buy a property. So this house here we've found, Nicola, is on the market at the moment. Going to auction very soon. Listed price at $590 to $620.
That doesn't look too bad.
So if you look at this property, let's go for a quick look through it. So we've got a brick face, nice neat backyard.
Got a cubby house as well.
Even like a little granny flat.
Here, shed, cubby house, house 2, alfresco. It's for all the big families.
Nice neat garden. Presents quite well.
And there's a garage. Don't really like the layout of it.
Look at the inside. They've done a renovation. So this might have been bought by a first home buyer.
Door doesn't look too painted.
That have renovated it, added value to it, and now selling it. Floorboards are good, very tidy. Been freshly painted, neat kitchen.
Bathroom's decent.
Yep, bathrooms are decent. Yep, this one's just had a renovation. So this might have been, how we did
Wouldn't say renovation, I'd say facelift.
Yep, fair enough. Okay, so Jacana. So this one here, they've got it listed at $590 to $620. You know how we were talking about bait pricing earlier?
Yeah. So
let's assume that this one's going to auction. Let's assume it's going to go for $650,000, which is probably realistic. On this scenario of $650 purchase, 95% loan is a loan of $617,500. Deposit required is $48,000. So this is under the government guarantee scheme. Again, first home buyer, 95% lend, no mortgage insurance. There is now some stamp duty there because above $600,000, you do begin paying stamp duty in Victoria.
Yeah.
So
that's also because it's not a new house.
Correct. So on this scenario here, as a single person, I ran some quick numbers on servicing, and they would need to earn around $115,000 a year
as an individual,
which may not be achievable for a first home buyer. So I've revisited the structure and this one as a couple buying their first home together. So based on that scenario, their income needs to be around that $70,000 each to be able to borrow the amount they require.
So that's not too bad.
Which again is around the mark for a first home buyer couple buying their first house. So in summary, deposit required $48,000, a single person income $115,000, but a couple around that $70,000 to buy their first house. So again, achievable for first home buyer, $48,000 deposit as a couple. Yep. I think it's worth considering purchasing a house, decent sized land, very livable house in an area not too far from the CBD in Victoria. So just as a recap, for as little as $21,000, you can get into an apartment just outside the CBD in Victoria, and you only need to earn around $60,000 per year. All the way up to a house, still under 20K to town. You got Jacana or Laverton, where you can buy a house in Laverton with a deposit as low as $29,000, or Jacana, where you're going to say $650,000 a purchase, deposit of around $48,000 for a couple to buy that house.
Yeah.
earning around $70,000 a year each. So the reason I wanted to make this episode, Nicola, because it really is possible to get into the market. There's so much talk about how young people can never buy a property. But here's 3 listings in 2025 where a first home buyer can get into the property market with a deposit as low as $21,000 for an apartment, $48,000 for a house, up to $650 for a couple. So I want you guys to know that it's genuinely possible to be able to purchase your first home. If you have a secure job earning more than $60,000, deposit of $21,000, you can get into the market.
This has been such an eye-opener, Dad.
I agree, Nicola. Let's go through this now for a few different states and make a few more episodes.
Comment below where you want us to do the top 3 areas for different states for first home buyers. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. I'm Nicola Kefalianos and we'll see you in the next episode.